Okay, somebody unmuted me now.
Yeah,
I think I'm unmuted.
Hey, Barbara.
Hello? Okay.
It's Will.
Okay, Ed, it's okay.
Ed is just now signing on, and so I was just waiting until.
Okay, I'm here. Barbara's here.
Ed.
I am here. Hello, everyone. Hi, Rita. I'm running out to get a refill. I'll be right back.
All right, Ed, it's 6:30. Do you want to wait a little while, or do you want to get started?
Can we just this is Barbara Chalky. I'm co-chair of the Housing Committee. Ed, and won't we introduce any board members who are on? Say who they are, please.
Sure. Do you want to wait a couple of minutes, Barbara?
We can wait a couple of minutes.
Okay. Hi, Sam. Is Sam muted?
He is. Yeah. You want me to unmute him?
No, that's okay.
He waved.
Okay. Hi, Rita. Okay. You want to wait till 6:35? Is that okay,
sure.
Everybody? Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I gave Wilma the numbers. She should be coming on. Wilma Johnson. Wilma, are you here?
She's not here yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Nice. We have a good turnout. Good turnout. Clean sheet of paper going here. Oh, Betty's with us. Hi, Betty.
Hi, Betty.
You can't see me. You can just hear me.
You can only hear me too, Betty.
I'm just waving in general. This is great. I love this. Better than this. This is better than the sign-in sheet. I can just go down the participant list and I don't have to be a nudge and ask everybody to sign. This is great. This is great. Okay, 2 more minutes, gang, and then we'll get started.
Okay. Ed, you didn't introduce yourself. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm going to give them 2 more minutes. I'm just
Okay.
chattering to chatter. We have. Tell you what, Al. All right, why don't we'll get started and I can write down names later. I'll let,
Well, why don't we just have the board members who are on introduce themselves? I'm Barbara Chalky, co-chair of the committee. Ed?
Ed Hartzog, co-chair of the committee. I think everybody's muted though, Barbara, so I'll read off who's here because I can see who's.
Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Yeah, so those of you who are not on the phone, and those who are on the phone, but if you're not on the phone, you can go to the participants tab at the bottom of your screen and see who's here. But from the board, we have our chair, Alita Camp is here, Anthony Cohn, Gail Barron, Kim Selway, Marco Tamayo, Rebecca Lamorte, Rita Popper is here, Sandra Coleman is here, and Tanya Barrero is here, along with a lot of familiar faces. Happy to see everybody. Welcome to the July Housing Committee meeting. And to our first, I think, Barbara, am I right? This is our first Zoom meeting, I think, as a committee.
Yep.
So for those who have been to our board meetings, Will is going to serve as our DJ. Barbara and I are unmuted. Everybody knows how to raise their hand if they have questions. But on the agenda for tonight, we have, very happy to have, through courtesy of an old friend, Rita knows very well, our good friend Victor Bach over at CSS has put us in touch with our guest tonight, which is Sam Stein, a new housing policy analyst at CSS. And Sam is...
Community Service Society, if anybody doesn't know that.
Thank you, Barbara. I was just thinking, that's a little too much for the acronyms. Thank you. Sam is going to update us on all things that are going on, including and beyond the rent assistance program that I believe, and Sam, I'll leave it to you to correct me if I'm wrong, which is still available for application till July 30. And we have the eviction moratorium, I think, to talk about. And Sam has told me that he has lots and lots of updates from Albany on pending legislation regarding rent, housing, and all things related to that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sam and let him do his thing. And when he's done, we'll open it up for questions. Sam, it's over to you.
Thanks so much, Ed, and nice to see many of you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Ed said, I'm a brand new housing policy analyst at the Community Service Society. I was actually the Community Planning Fellow at Community Board 8 way back in 2011. So nice to be back in this different forum. So Ed asked me to talk a little bit about the state of housing evictions, the state of the rental assistance program, and other things going on in Albany. Just for a time frame, how long would you like me to go for?
As you have, until people start dropping off, but use your discretion. But I mean, you
Okay.
have,
We want you to cover what's important, and everything's important right now. So go ahead,
course.
it's yours.
All right, so I'll speak for a little bit, and then I'll answer any questions that people have. I'm sure you'll also have questions that I don't have answers for. I will do my best to get answers for them and get them back to the co-chairs to distribute to the committee. So the first thing is, as everyone knows, that the housing situation is quite dire. We've seen a lot of alarming reports, without a blanket statement, a lot of them are perfectly accurate. With unemployment around 20% officially, and therefore likely quite a bit higher. A lot of tenants are having trouble paying rent. The latest statistic showed about a quarter of tenants did not pay full rent last month, which is kind of high given a 20% unemployment rate, since there's usually a number of tenants who don't pay. But a lot of people who are unemployed are relying on those unemployment expanded checks, including the extra $600, which are set to expire if they're not extended by Congress. We have in place an eviction moratorium, which I'll talk about in a moment. But as that is phased out, if other action isn't taken, we could see a whole lot of evictions. You see the same metaphor is being used all the time, a landslide, a tsunami. It's really true. And so it's important that action be taken, especially at the state and federal level, to stop this. But the city should do everything it can as well. So right now, the state of New York has an eviction moratorium in place until August 20th. That's already been extended from, I think it was August 5th to August 20th. It could be extended again. But as it was extended this last time, it was also diminished. So it now is not a blanket eviction moratorium. It's a moratorium on evictions for people who can't prove that their inability to pay is directly related to COVID. And that's going to cover a lot of people, but there's still going to be plenty who are left out, including people who are paid under the table and might not have the ability to get a reference for their newfound unemployment. It also doesn't cover people who became unemployed in phase 4, which we're in right now in New York City. So that's going to be a lot of people as well. We've just heard that there's a new round of restaurants and bars that are going to be closing. Workers in those restaurants who are newly unemployed are not covered under what's called the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which was passed at the end of June and is the piece of legislation that protects workers who lost income or became sick as a result of COVID. That said, the courts have still not really reopened. They can reopen, but in New York City, they haven't. So while cases are being filed, they're not yet being executed. The courts are open online for tenants filing housing part cases against their landlords for things like emergency repairs that need to be made, or harassment, or illegal lockouts, which can be one roommate against another. Or the courts are open for pre-COVID cases where both parties have attorneys and are seeking either settlements or to file motions. But evictions are not going through at the moment, even though the protections are not as strong as we want them to be. On top of that, it's also worth noting that the city's Department of Investigations told its city marshals not to conduct evictions, and we have no expiration on that. So it's also possible that the state could end its eviction moratorium, but the city could continue to tell its city marshals not to act on them. So that's maybe something to keep an eye on for the future. There's also a federal eviction moratorium on tenants whose landlords receive federal funding. And the clearest case of that is NYCHA residents, whose landlord is the public authority, but also Section 8 tenants, tenants in buildings that were built with the low-income housing tax credit, which is most affordable housing, and then most affordable housing that's been built in the last 30 years anyway. And then any building that got mortgages with Freddie or Fannie. If there was any federal intervention, then the tenants can't be evicted. So we've got this patchwork of federal, state, and city eviction protections. There are tenants who will fall through the cracks. At the moment, I think it's doing its job, but if any combination of those are taken away, we could see real trouble for tenants in the future. So the legislature has passed one major rent relief program for those workers who, it's mostly geared at people who lost some income, but not all, but it could be for people who lost all income. This is what it does. It's a one-time payment to landlords. And this is complicated, so if it's not clear, just please let me know. But it covers the increase in tenants' rent burden for March, April, May, and June. So let's say that beforehand, before the COVID pandemic in New York, you were paying 35% of your income. Generally, we say tenants to be in housing that's affordable to them should pay 30% or less of their income. But if you were rent burdened before this, and you were paying 35% of your income, but now your income has gone down as your rent stays flat, your new rent burden might be 50%, or it might be 100% if you've lost all income altogether. Under this program, the state will pay the difference between what you paid before and what you can afford to pay now. Let's say if your rent burden was 35% before, now it's 50%, it will take you back to a 35% rent burden, in other words. If you were severely rent burdened before, though, you'll still be severely rent burdened now, you just won't be more rent burdened than you used to be. So this really doesn't help tenants who are in rough shape beforehand. It's not clear where they're going to come up with the money to pay the rent if their incomes really have dropped as much as we've seen. Our agency does an annual survey of low-income workers. One question we always ask is, how much savings do you have in reserved should you lose your income? And it's very common that the answer is negligible. So we think this is a better than nothing program, but really not close to the need for this moment.
Sam, is it safe to say that that really hurts regressively, obviously, when you're talking about rent burdens on lower wage workers? Obviously, right? They're more rent burdened, I would imagine. Yes, is that right? Okay.
That is correct, especially if they're in private housing without Section 8 subsidies or something like that. That group was already the most rent burdened, whereas somebody who had a small rent burden would still be qualified for this program. The other thing is it has a cap of $100 million. So that's how much the state is willing to spend. It will spend no more. It can be used to cover either missed or incomplete rent payments, or if a tenant has paid their rent so far, even with that higher rent burden, it can be used to cover future rents. So that's a good thing. It can also replenish a security deposit if you used your security deposit to pay for some of the rent you couldn't afford these last few months. So here's who's eligible for it. Households that earn less than 80% of area median income before March 1st and paid more than 30% of their gross income in rent, and can prove all of that. So you had to be under 80% of AMI, which is not really low income. That's kind of closer to moderate to comfortable incomes. And you had to be rent burdened before March 1st. So if you're rent burdened now, but you weren't then, you don't qualify. If you earned more than 80% of AMI then, but now you're unemployed, you don't qualify. And you have to have lost income between April 1st and July 31st. So it also doesn't cover anybody who was immediately affected by this pandemic in mid-March, which, in certain areas pretty hard, pretty fast. So people who are ineligible, like I said, people who are low income now but weren't then, people who were not rent burdened then but are now, people who were rent burdened before and are still rent burdened but haven't lost income, undocumented households without a single citizen or person who's a legal resident. So if there's one legal resident in the household, you qualify, but if none are, then the household doesn't. This doesn't include public housing, Section 8, or other voucher recipients because they can reapply for their programs at their new lower income. And it doesn't cover people whose rent is over 125% of what HUD considers the fair market rent standards. So if your rent was already pretty high, higher than HUD thinks it should be, you don't get covered, which I imagine could include some members in Community Board 8, even though they might be under 80% AMI. So how you get it is you apply online from the Division of Homes and Community Renewal. The website predictably crashed after 10 minutes of opening, given the magnitude of people who were trying to apply statewide. It's back up, but it's still very difficult. There's only a 2-week application window, and we are in week 1 right now. There's 1 more week, and then it is closed. So people with limited internet access really need somebody else to help them through this, whether that's a tenant organization or a elected official's constituent service or the board itself. The HCR says that they're going to prioritize based on, quote, greatest economic and social need. So that could undo some of the regressive nature of this that Ed pointed to, but they have not given us a formula, so we don't exactly know how they're going to go about prioritizing who should get this. It's certain that more than $100 million worth of rent support will be requested. So it's also certain that some people will be denied. I really hope that they do keep to this commitment to prioritize people who are most at risk of homelessness or eventual eviction once that eviction moratorium expires, but we do not know how they're going to make their decision.
Sam, do you think they're going to add any money to it as the time goes on?
They could. So Albany is back in session right now for an emergency session, but the governor has suggested that the state not approve anything that will cost more money. And so far, the state Senate
Really?
and Assembly leadership have gone along with that. And their political logic is if the state shows that it is willing to spend more money now, it will be harder for the state to request major reimbursements from the federal government, which is absolutely necessary. It seems to me that the federal government is already showing that it's not really willing to pay as much as necessary. I don't know that they'll really be looking at the actions of Carl Heastie and the Assembly and legislature, but that is the current political line. And so there are people who are organizing against that, or who are saying we should just pass the legislation now and figure out how to pay it later and use that as leverage to get payments from the federal government.
Or maybe do a millionaire tax, income tax.
Right, so that legislation has been introduced. I believe Jessica Ramos in the state Senate is the sponsor there. I don't remember who the Assembly sponsor is, but to bring in more revenue by taxing the highest income residents. And then that money could be used on expanding this rent assistance program. There are 3 big and fairly comprehensive bills that are being introduced right now in Albany as well, which the coalition of groups that coalesced around the rent reforms last year are supporting. I can tell you about all 3 of them. I will say that it's very hard to see these bills passed without both a groundswell of support and without federal commitments of money. But this is what those groups, which CSS is a part of, have determined would be the comprehensive solution to the rent problem. So the first is a program called Housing Access Vouchers. And this is a bill sponsored by Brian Kavanaugh in the Assembly and Stephen Simbrowitz in the Senate that would provide housing vouchers for those currently homeless and those at risk of homelessness to move from temporary hotels and shelters into permanent housing. And it would cover the pretty big gap that exists between what the city is currently offering homeless and near homeless residents in terms of rent vouchers and what the actual cost of rent is in New York City. So that would be a program to essentially very quickly shelter in safe conditions everybody who needs it and to eliminate some of the potential spread of COVID that exists in congregate housing shelters, which are very dangerous conditions under any circumstance, but certainly under this pandemic. Then there's a bill for extending the eviction moratorium and including foreclosures in it as well. That bill is sponsored by Zelnor Myrie in the Assembly and Karina Reyes in the Senate. It's
Sam,
been,
could you give us
yeah.
those bill numbers? Sorry to interrupt. Could you give us the bill numbers for those?
Yeah, let me go back. So Housing Access Voucher, Senate 7628A. S7628A. The Assembly bill is A9657A. 9657A. So those are the numbers for Housing Access Voucher Program. On the extended eviction and foreclosure moratorium, there is no Assembly number yet. The Senate number is S8667. That's S8667. So this would protect commercial and residential tenants from eviction during the state of emergency, plus give them an extra year to recover, given that the economic fallout is going to be much longer than the epidemiological fallout. And it prevents filings of and executions of both evictions and foreclosures. And this, like I said, it covers commercial and residential homeowners and renters. So this is a fairly comprehensive bill that would just keep people in place. If businesses close, of course, the landlords can bring in a new tenant, but as long as they're operational, they can't be evicted lack of payment. Final and perhaps most expansive and even controversial bill is a cancel rent bill that is sponsored in the Senate by Julia Salazar and in the Assembly by Yulene New. The Senate bill number is 08802, S08802, Assembly A10826. A10826. So this, quite simply, cancels rents from March 7th until the duration of the crisis plus 90 days. It is designed to be universal because there are many ways that tenants fall through the cracks. And it understands that landlords can't simply operate without rents, but it puts the onus on the landlords rather than the tenants to prove the hardship. So it includes a landlord hardship fund, which is designed to prioritize small operators, nonprofits, and public housing authorities before all other potential landlords. And landlords can basically get their rent payments covered, but in exchange, they have to open their books and demonstrate that they actually have hardship. So this is the way that other programs work. Mitchell-Lama also requires operators to open up their books to show that they do in fact need higher rent or maintenance costs. The old rent control system similarly required that landlords show that they were reinvesting their rents into their buildings. So this would bring back that system for landlords that operate, that take that hardship fund. And it also requires that landlords who take the hardship fund freeze their rents to pre-COVID rates for 5 years and abide by what they call good cause eviction standards, which means tenants can be evicted for non-payments once this cancel rent program ends, but they can't be evicted simply because the landlord would rather bring in somebody else who can pay higher rent. So it's a guaranteed lease renewal, essentially, as long as tenants are paying rent and aren't nuisances to their neighbors.
Sam, quick question on the duration of the crisis. Is the definition of the end of the crisis, is that defined by what I read when I've been catching up on all these executive orders from the governor? Is that preamble he has on all his executive orders under the authority of, I think it is 29B of whatever, I forgot the law, that's doesn't matter. Is that the trigger when that authority ends, that's the end of the crisis, and then it's plus 90 days?
That's my understanding, yes. It's the state of emergency, which is the same as the extended eviction protections, only those go a year out from the end of the state of emergency. The cancel rent goes 3 months out, 90 days.
Okay. Wow, that's really great. Thank you so much. Do you have more, or is that's pretty much?
That was where I was going to close. That's the state of play right now. Happy to answer any questions I can.
Yeah. So, what do you want to open it up to the public first? For those.
Oh, let's just open it up to the public at least if they have key questions. Yes.
So,
Nothing personal, just questions about the law. Other stuff you can maybe submit later, but in the chat. But questions about the regulations or the proposed regulations or how to interpret them. Nothing about your own situation.
Right.
Yeah, and just a reminder for everybody to raise your hand so that Barbara and Ed can call on you. Go to the participants menu at the bottom of your screen.
I can't call on them because I can't see, so Ed have to do the calling on. I'm gonna dial in.
Yeah,
I recognize that. It's the participants box at the bottom of your screen. You click on the button that says participants, has the number 19 next to it. It'll open up a box. You'll see a button that says raise hand. Click on that. It'll elevate you in the participants menu. And if you're on the phone, it's *9.
And I see Rita right away. Rita, if you could unmute her. Rita, good to see you, albeit far away.
Sam, you were terrific. I'm just going to put some numbers to what you said. What is 80% AMI? Accordingly, one person, 80% AMI falls between $41,700 to $63,600. For homeless people, homeless families, homeless people who are currently in hotels and motels, the city pays them, pays the owners $250 per week. Doesn't matter how many people are in the room, that's their standard. So I just wanted to put, so you know what does 80% mean? That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. That's very helpful. Anybody else? I can't believe with this group that we don't have any questions in this group for Sam. I can't imagine. Really? There we go.
He was very clear. It was very clear. That's why.
Yeah, well, he was very clear. He was very clear. Sam, you're too good. We're going to have to not have you come anymore because you have, no, here we go. I knew we would have some questions.
So you have a few questions. Elizabeth Rose, you'll have to unmute yourself. Elizabeth, you're good to go.
You're good to go.
I apologize for any background noise. My husband is in the same room on a call as well. Anyway. So in the bill that would provide funding for the gap between what the city is paying for rental assistance and the actual cost of rent for the currently homeless households, are there in fact enough available apartments such that if this bill were passed, all these families could be housed?
We do. That would be spectacular.
That's a good question.
Send them over. The answer is yes.
We think so. The vacancy counts in the city are higher than the number of homeless people who have been counted. There's the question of where they are. There's the question of at what rents. And given the recent, departure of a larger number of people from the city, there might even be a higher vacancy rent right now than the last time the city checked. There's a larger question also about hotel rooms that whose operators don't believe that tourism is going to return anytime soon enough to make them economically viable, and whether it makes sense to convert those into permanent housing. That's a question that I'm looking into, that a lot of groups are thinking about, and if so, how to do it in the safest way for the residents and for the communities, and what it would take economically to, convert hotel rooms into Class A apartments with kitchens and the rest. So
and also, what kind of regulations are going to be for rent regulations if we do that?
Right. Would it count as the old SRO
That's
hotels,
right.
or would it be something else?
Yeah.
Those are open questions. And in some ways, it's a quite dire situation. There are a lot of homeless people, and there's a lot of rooms right now that are available. So it makes sense to act soon. On the other hand, it's probably a very expensive proposition. And so we're going to need either new revenue streams or, in my opinion, a federal recovery package that would cover something like that.
And we may need some supportive services to go with those rooms.
Right. I mean, in the past, when hotels have been converted in this way by nonprofits, they have been at least 20% supportive housing, which means having social support services in-house.
That's right.
Which is a highly effective way of ending street homelessness.
Elizabeth, I had muted you because we heard a lot of background, but if you had any follow-up to that, you can unmute again.
Yeah.
But if not,
no.
Hyena.
Hyena. Oh, I'm sorry. I pronounced your name wrong when I introduced everyone. My apologies.
Hyena, there you go.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Thank you. I'm totally okay. It's a tough name to pronounce, so it's all right. I appreciate the apology. Thank you. Sam, thank you. That was extraordinarily helpful and very sort of well laid out, sort of the best I've heard explained. I'm curious if you can share, you mentioned that under the HCR program, one of the conditions was whether HUD thinks the rent is already too high, so applicants wouldn't qualify. And so it sounded like you mentioned that could be a problem that you would anticipate residents in our district and Community Board 8 would face. Can you either elaborate on that or talk a little bit more about some of the other qualifications and requirements of the HCR program that you think would make it difficult for people who should otherwise qualify or seem to be in need in our particular district in Community Board 8 that might make it challenging for them to end up actually qualifying for these benefits?
Right. So the rule is that it doesn't cover people whose rent is over 125% of the Federal Housing and Urban Development Agency's fair market rent standards. And I'm not an expert in HUD fair market rent standards, so I'm not totally sure how they're calculated. If anyone on this call is, or if Rita wants to look up the numbers, maybe we could get more specific, but I imagine that that might be more of a burden in higher rent parts of the city than in lower rent parts of the city, because I don't think that it's targeted by anything quite as specific as a community district.
No, it's a much larger district.
So I could check out, if no one knows it offhand, what exactly the fair market rate standards would be in District 8, but I imagine that might be an issue. And the other issue is if people earn too much before, but are now earning nothing,
sure.
Then they would be caught in a loophole as well.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Or I mean, just to go over the ineligibilities again, it's people who weren't low income then but are now, people who are not rent burdened before but are now. So maybe your rent actually matched your income before, but when your income drops, it no longer does, you would not be eligible for this relief. Households where no members are documented residents, and then people who are above this 125% fair market rent standard. Those are the exclusion categories.
sorry, I was trying to look up the fair market rent levels.
If no one can find them, I can follow up with those.
So I can't see everybody, but I just dialed that up on Google. So Sam, correct me if you think this is way off, but it looks like what I'm reading is for fiscal year 2020, the fair market rent documentation system for New York, HUD, Metro, fair market rent area, FMRs for all bedroom sizes. For an efficiency, that is $1,665 for a 1 bedroom, $1,714 for a 2 bedroom, $1,951 For a 3-bedroom, 2,472, and for a 4-bedroom, it is 2,643. And then below that, it says New York is part of the New York HUD Metro FMR area, which consists of the following counties: Bronx, New York, Kings, Putnam, Queens, Richmond, Rockland, and Rockland County.
Right. So thank you for looking that up. That does sound right. And that means that that's the same as the AMI catchment area median income. New York City plus Putnam and Rockland, which can have a distorting effect on the amounts. So if your rent was 25% higher than those numbers at your bedroom number, then you would be disqualified from this program. I guess I leave it to the experts in CB8 whether you think that's going to be an issue in your community, but it seems worth looking into.
Okay. And you have a follow-up, or you're good? I see you put your hand down.
Good.
I'll take that as a no follow-up. And I think the next person up is Billy Freeland. Billy's unmuted.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. This was terrific, and I'm very much looking forward to reading your book, which I've been putting off for far too long.
Thanks a lot.
Apologies if any of the background thunder distracts, but I'll try to keep it quick. I'm not sure if any of these bills touch on commercial rent specifically. A lot of our beleaguered mom and pop small businesses. Forgive me if I missed it. Is there anything that's being contemplated for helping those businesses? I pulled up the Salazar bill on rent cancellation. It looks like Section 4 just specifies residential renters. So is there anything else that you can add? Did I miss it? Let us know. Thanks.
Sure. And thanks for getting my book. The eviction moratorium extension bill does cover commercial as well as residential tenants. So of the three that I listed, that is the only one that will help small businesses. There may be other bills that have been introduced specifically on small business aid that I'm not privy to because my work is in the housing section. That's worth looking into. I in fact suspect that there probably were. But of the housing ones and the rent bills, only the extended eviction protections cover commercial tenants as well as residential.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Marco, I see that you are up. We have Marco Tamayo. And Marco, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for this information. Some information about this hard situation. But I'm going to raise 4 points. My first point is the commercial moratorium. I think it's too late. Legislators are running late. No respect, but probably they don't even understand what's going on. And I walk 2nd Avenue for promoting to help them. 2nd Avenue, I found that 50% of their stores, they are gone. I walk 1st Avenue, 30% or more are gone. So it's too late. And York Avenue, I think it's a similar percentage, even though the York Avenue is residential. And we have to maintain residential, even though some fellow community member doesn't understand the concept of planning, the concept of preservation of residential district. And this is one point. The second point that I would like to raise is the good news, which basically is it covers the Michoacán and Section 8 program, which I don't think that we have much in our community, this program. And the second one, for the landlord that receive Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans, you're gonna have an opportunity to hold the payments in favor of the landlord, which is, I think, is good because the landlord deserves to be paid, by the way. And finally, the bad news. The bad news is our community approximately have, if I'm not wrong, 141,000 households, from which 49,000 are households that have serious problems, such as the 52% of the 141,000, they're paying more than 30% of the rental income. And 23%, they already pay 50%, which basically everything what you say, those our residents, they already gone. And I had to raise the issues in our community. With all respect, I don't want to say I don't care the rest of the city, but our role is basically is to legislate always or to help our neighbor, our residents, not to help anybody else outside of the district. Indeed, I myself, I testify in the housing meeting in the budget in favor, while other fellow community members ask money for criminal justice, which basically we don't have in our community. I think my perception is we don't have on this bill, we don't have almost nothing for our communities. And we are talking about approximately 50,000 households. And that is our concern. That is our discussion. And I don't think it's gonna be helpful. And I'm seeing many in the around my neighbor. I have a lot of friends that are landlords. I went to the buildings and I saw that most of the tenants they already left. Why? Because they consider that it won't be able to, incapable to pay. So your information, I think, is good, excellent, but unhelpful for our needs. Or maybe I can say it, maybe our legislators doesn't help us much. It probably helps other communities more, or maybe more needed, more in need people, such as the homeless, which I agree with them. I'm not saying that they don't need, but for our community itself, I think we don't have no legislation, and we're gonna see serious problems. And to finish this one, I should say is it is sad that we don't have nothing about our community in this bill. You have for other community, which is basically I'm very happy for them, but I'm happy for our community. We have to see what's going on in our community. And personal myself, I found it that very sad a day for us. Thank you.
Okay. Sam, I don't know if that was so much as a question, but if you have any thoughts on any of that.
I leave it up to the board to decide whether either the actions that have been taken by the state and city and federal governments live up to your needs. I would say that the three bills that I discussed probably would have a major impact on those tenants who are paying more than 50% of their income in rent. But again, I leave that up to you all to decide how it would shake out and what to support. I would say that I strongly agree with Marco that the scale of the problem and the speed that it's coming at us is far bigger than the scale and speed of action that has been taken. And I think we should all take that very seriously.
Sam,
I would like to raise one more point.
Sure.
So you may will understand what's going on. I was discussing with Isabel from the board president the same issues because I handled very well this point since more than 6 months, and I prepared a plan for that also too. But she told me when I was raising the issue of how much you contribute for rent, and she stopped me and she said, "Wait a minute, affordable housing is my problem," and I had to face them. You know why? Because I work for the board president. My first check, she received 2 checks apparently. She said, my first check is just only for rent. And part of my second check is also for the rent. So clearly right there, this is we have a serious problem. It's a big disparity of the rental market versus what is the real income. Even though that there is now a law that the people should have an minimal income per hour, which is $50, and you're talking about if it's one family, one person and the family is working, you're talking about $30,000 right there. But the question is they really, really receive the 30% of their income? Thank you.
Oh, I like this. I don't know who put that up, but that's great.
No, that wasn't me. Thank you.
Oh, very nice. I like that, Marco.
No, it wasn't me.
It was me. It was me.
I'm wondering. Okay.
Our YouTube viewers are only seeing black screens, so I just wanted something to see.
That was nice. Sam, I had a question for you. Which one of these three? I mean, it looks like the second one has, based on what you described, the second one has a more comprehensive for everybody with the commercials and the owners and the renters. Which one of these three, if any, has a shot of passing, or are they all going to pass, or what do you think?
I don't want to get ahead of it too much, either as a political pundit or as a housing policy analyst. I've definitely heard concern that very little will be passed in this emergency session because there's so much uncertainty at the federal level. But I think there's also going to be a major push from all those groups that mobilized in the summer of 2019 around the rent. And so I wouldn't write any of them out. And I also, we really don't know what the federal timeline is for the next round of stimulus or for extending the expanded unemployment insurance. And so that could happen sooner, in which case some of these bills might become more possible. So I guess I'm dodging the question, but for good reason.
I understand. I understand. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions? I don't know. I will confess, I'm not sure what we can do from our humble perch. I, of course, have all ears for anything that anybody has in terms of constructive ideas or things that we can do to help move positive forward.
I mean, our elected officials are all supporting this, so that's the problem. Others aren't.
Marco has his hand up.
Marco, you have your hand up. You have an idea?
Of course. The idea is first we had to stop 421.8 program to have just only for 30 years. It has to be in perpetuity, because when you have in perpetuity, you have an opportunity to this housing become a regulator in the housing market. Why? Because the issue is in 30 years is going to disappear the investment of millions of dollars that put the city in affordable housing. After 30 years, it's gone. So we're going back to zero in 20 years. And the city paid millions of dollars to the developers, just only to the developers to become millionaires. And I strongly support the developers, by the way. I would like, and I think they deserve to have some income. They deserve to have some possibilities to make successful in those business. But I cannot support that after 30 years gone. So it has to be in perpetuity. I have another issue, the affordable housing. I believe it's one of the issues in our community is this is something brand new. I believe not in the millionaire tax. I believe in the taxes for developments near to the subway station. The city put $14 billion to do the Second Avenue subway. And the developers come in, they demolish the existing affordable housing. And why? Because they said this is their house, they put it, the people outside, they reduce the affordability in our community. Why they reduce the affordability, the housing in our community become harder to find and more expensive and poor quality. Or some of the residents, they have to leave. So it creates an spatial segregation in our community. So that that program, it should be implemented, especially for the same amount of affordable units that they demolished. It has to be produced inside of the development. Oh, well, most of the people, they say, no, it cannot do that because I cannot put together wealthy people with low income families. Okay, I understand. More or less the concept is the water and the oil. Fine. But put it inside of the community board. Buy it another building. Put affordable housing over there so we don't lose the housing stock affordability in our community. We have another choices. Those developers that are coming to develop affordable housing do not put in a declining neighborhood like they did. You know very well, Ed. They put it in the Bronx. They ask, and the wealthy people is just only moving in that part. Rent for a studio $5,000. Rent for the penthouse, I think it's $36,000 a month. So they want to bring rich people, wealthy people. Fine, I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem is, do not demolish the affordable housing. Do not put, they come in, they offer to put affordable housing and they put in declining neighborhood. That is wrong, absolutely wrong. Thank you.
Okay. Barbara? No? Sam? Anybody? Barbara, did I?
I
No?
don't know if
Hello?
Barbara's- Yeah, you're muted still.
Oh, Rita. Rita has her hand up. I see Rita has her hand up.
Rita, just there you go. Confirm. Oh,
Rita's
sorry.
unmuted.
I'll also take down. Sorry.
We are obviously in an emergency situation, a situation that we have never been in before. The question is that unfortunately, legislators who do get their salary every month move slowly. It's like turning an elephant around in a very small elevator. What happens, let's say if it takes 3 months from today, 3 months until something passes, what happens to those people in between?
This has to pass now, or it'll be too late. This is Barbara. They don't have that long. This has to pass now. They're not going to keep on going back into session.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they think they are going to keep going back into session, and you know, their approach seems to be from the governor down to do just enough to keep things held as they are, as the problem, you know, gets bigger. So, you know, the eviction moratorium in the first place was very important and needed to happen, but a moratorium is just forestalling an eventual eviction unless some other action is taken. And we did pass the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which says that basically, you know, you can't be evicted for not paying rent because of COVID, but you still have to repay the rent. And if you lost your income, it's going to be next to impossible to do that, especially if you are already rent burdened. So
and some of them may have left the city by then.
Plenty will. And, you know, we don't want people to have to leave the city under these dire circumstances. And it's going to be very hard for the city to recover if those who can leave. And so I think we are going to need a lot of action, but like you say, that's not how the system is designed. But they are responsive to a groundswell of voices calling for immediate action that's more than just the smallest repair. And I think having a vision of what you all decide is necessary to match the scope of the problem is what it'll take. And I know that you don't yourself, as the housing committee of a community board, have the legislative power at the state level, but it does matter if, you know, especially if you can organize with your colleagues in other community boards, if there can be a program of what you think needs to happen at the state. I think that's an important voice to get out there. Whether that means revenue, whether that means extended tenant protections, thinking commercial, thinking residential, whether it means, you know, demanding a federal intervention because they have the power of debt spending, whatever it is that you decide is necessary, I believe that it's important that you have your voices heard.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sam. I think you're also right in terms of, what was it Marco was saying, we need to look out for obviously the residents of Community District 8. That's our job. We're Community Board 8. But I think all of us agree that we're obviously stronger with all 12 community boards in Manhattan and obviously all 59 in the city, but all 12. I wonder if anybody knows what the borough president's office, our borough president, where she is on this. I'm sure she's supportive of these, of all of these bills. I just don't know, where she is in terms of trying to provide, as you say, Sam, a little more additive incentive. I see Alita has her hand up. Maybe Alita, you might have some info for us from Gail's office, or maybe from the latest borough board meeting or something.
I don't. There are so many issues surrounding the virus and COVID and all of the economic fallout that I don't. And I wish I did. Had I anticipated this, I would have had maybe the foresight to have asked. But what I'm wondering is, one of the things that may make sense is some kind of comprehensive city plan with housing, because New York City should not be a Greenwich, Connecticut. For the wealthy only. There are middle-class people, the teachers, the nurses, there are lower income people. Everyone has to be here. Could this be, I mean, I know that there are, it's a dire emergency and something needs to be done right away, but could this become an opportunity to rethink how the city functions and how people should live together, and to have a city that works economically for the people who want to be here and the people who work here? It's something that we've asked for with the charter commissions, and something that's been fought by certain people with certain political interests. So I'm just wondering. Thank you. And you did an excellent job in explaining this and talking about it. So thank you for that.
Happy to do it. And I've been a proponent of comprehensive and community-based planning for a long time. And I agree with you. This is a moment where I think the inefficiencies and insufficiencies of the existing planning system are very clear for all to see. And it's a moment where the crisis hits different communities differently, but it does touch everybody enough that I think there might be more momentum around comprehensive planning than there might have been a year ago, when really the city should have done it in the charter process. There's also a new mayoral election and something like 2/3 of the city council turning over. So that, combined with the scale of issues we're facing, combined with a change in consciousness of a city that I think got to see just how unplanned things are and how dangerous that can be, could be the impetus for comprehensive planning. I want to make sure that it is simultaneously comprehensive and community-based. And that's a tough tightrope to walk.
That's hard.
It is hard. It is certainly hard. And what it doesn't mean to me is listening to everybody and then doing what you were going to do anyway. Mm-hmm. It has to also not mean every community plans for itself. And this is a longer conversation, but it probably means a series of guidelines, shared responsibilities among community boards, taking into account the sensitivities of local areas, as well as the ways that certain areas have been privileged in the past in terms of environmental siting and other issues. And saying everybody has to do this much. You figure out how you're going to accomplish that. So that's, I think, the way that you combine comprehensive with community-based. Again, it's not easy, and it requires some shared sacrifice as well as shared gain. But I think it should be clear that in a moment of crisis, we were not prepared, and we suffered tremendously in terms of human life, let alone all the economic impacts afterward.
Rita, I saw you have your hand up. Can we unmute Rita?
Rita, you just have to confirm it. You're good.
I have a question. In all the years in the state Senate and housing has been a very hard topic to get any passage on because so much of the state, New York City is so different than the rest of the state, than Buffalo, than Rochester, than Albany. And those people don't, the people in the suburbs, you know, who have a smaller population, it doesn't affect them that much. And there's no incentive for them to hurry up and get it done. What do we do in the meantime? I mean, like, I'm trying to breathe life into the patient, and I don't know, how long is this going to take? I mean, tomorrow is too late. What do we do in the meantime? I'm scared.
That's completely reasonable. It has been very hard to move on housing legislation in the past. The changing composition of the state Senate and the recent elections this year may add some fuel to that fire. I'd say that you're right that the conditions in those places that you named, Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, are different than New York, but they're kind of getting closer. There are certain problems that are faced in New York City as well as there. There are also certain landlords that have bought property in those places as well, including even mobile home centers. So in this last round of organizing around the rent laws, tenants in New York City found common cause with mobile home residents in the outer ring suburbs because some of the same corporate investors had bought the buildings in New York City and were buying these basically RV lots and raising the rents in both places. And so there can be organizing that happens across the state. I think there is a greater urban, suburban, rural divide than there is a divide between upstate cities and downstate cities. And that common cause could be useful in pushing forward. But I'd also say that a lot of homeowners are going to be facing potential foreclosure. And it's not just renters and it's not just co-op owners and other forms of ownership that we're more familiar with in New York City. I think that as after 2008, there's going to be a significant amount of pressure on the single family home stock as well. In the past, we've sometimes seen those housing issues get a lot more money in terms of stemming foreclosure of single family homeowners rather than multifamily homeowners or the evictions of tenants that can result in those cases. And so I hope that the changing political balance means that we can address the real and pressing needs of potentially foreclosed homeowners as well as the very real and pressing needs of tenants and multifamily dwellers in New York City.
Marco, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Rita just said. Tomorrow is too late. I think she's absolutely right. She's afraid of the future because you, Sam, you just mentioned, you touched the big point right here. New elections with the mayor and the other officials. And the biggest problem that we have is a lot of demagogues running, and when they finish to learn, their period is gone. So we're still back to point zero. So a good example is, I was in the state housing hearings last November, and you see it that there are some good legislators that have good intentions to produce affordable housing. But there is at the same time other people that they don't like that idea. For instance, some people, they go and they say, look, why not you can put affordable housing in the low densities community? They are right, but they are wrong. They're right because they're supposed to have affordable housing too, but they are wrong because the infrastructure underground cannot receive no more affordable, no more density. However, in our district, we have, and that's caught me my attention, the NYCHA development is mid-density. When I analyze very careful, First Avenue and York Avenue are high densities. Indeed, the developers already put huge buildings, and we, in affordable housing, we put mid-density. I mean, it doesn't have no sense. And another point right there is the quality of housing that they offer to the NYCHA residents. You're talking about the social justice. They said the blacks die around the country more than anybody else, and second, the Hispanics. In New York City, the Hispanics die more than the blacks. But if you analyze this development of NYCHA, where there are 3,800 complaints about the building, and most of them is about the elevator. And what are they talking about the problems of the virus? You have to reduce to the 50% of the capacity of the elevators. However, in NYCHA developments, or in all the NYCHAs, I guess, the elevator doesn't work. So right there, they reduce their capacity to 50%. And then the government said, and they're right, by the way, now you have to reduce 50% more. I'm thinking a person like our fellow community member, which I admire a lot, Wilma, she's in a wheelchair and she has to take the elevator down, and one of the elevators doesn't work. So how is the fairness in the social justice right here, that when a person cannot be in compliance with their own rules of the government? So I think this is the major issue. Issue is they don't understand. They want to put low density when the infrastructure in those areas was developed to put higher density. And that is one of the biggest problems what I perceive to produce affordable housing. Another problem is in our neighborhood, this is another characteristic unique. We don't have vacant lots for affordable housing because everything is built up. So where are we going to put affordable housing? So
okay, this is Barbara. Anybody have any other ideas what we should do now about the legislation that's in Albany? At the least, we want to get that passed.
Well, the only thing I would say, the only I would like to say is, well, you have to do something for us, because for us there's almost nothing. Thank you.
Well, wait a minute. I think those bills will help us too, and I think we should push those bills. I mean, I would love it. I don't think the board will fully. Well, there's no board meeting until September, but I would like to definitely go back, and I've done this before with the budget, to talk about a millionaire income tax, how we could pay for some of these things, because I think that's what it's down to, is redistribution of wealth, and we're not going to help any affordable housing if we don't start doing that. But right now, they're in Albany, they're in session. As I said, I think our legislators are doing all they can to push it. But what do we do? That's why I think the lead of the borough board is important. I wonder what the other boards, are they supporting this legislation? Everybody's talking about it, but are they pushing their legislators? And we have to talk to legislators outside of New York City.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, do we have something? Does anybody have an idea as to, a resolution or something that we could, get something going? Does anybody have any thoughts? Billy, I see you have your hand raised.
Well, maybe we should do a resolution's not going to pass the full board until September, so that may be a problem.
That's a good point too. That's
yeah, that was going to be my comment, which is I'm happy to propose a resolution that we support all of the legislation that Sam has sort of reviewed and explained to us. But I want to first make sure there's interest in the committee. I think there's some value of at least the committee passing a resolution, even if we're not able to get it in front of the whole full board. But I want to defer to Barbara.
I would certainly be willing to do that, and maybe we can do a letter to the speaker who I know supporting this too, the Speaker of the Assembly and the Majority Leader of the Senate, and at least we can do a letter. We can do a letter without can't we, Alita? We can do a letter without going to the full board.
Can we? I don't know.
Yeah, other committees have.
We
Okay.
have, but we have to. I think we can't wait to the third week of September to do this.
Yes, we should write a letter once there's a committee approval of doing something like that. And I will reach out to all of the other Manhattan boards and ask if they are supporting the legislation. Alternatively, once there's a letter, I will send that along to the other boards and ask them for their support and see if there is some kind of either joint letter, or they could do their own and talk to the borough president about it. But
I know the borough president is pushing it as much as she can. You know, the governor and the mayor don't always listen to her, unfortunately.
I know. I meant in terms of getting some kind of uniform response from all of the community boards. But in the meantime, I think a letter is a really good start. But the committee needs to
and that helps them, because then they can use the letters. If all the boards write these letters,
that's right.
They can use it to get other legislators to support it.
That's right. And it's something that touches every district in the city. So there should be a lot of. Billy made a motion. Does somebody want to second it?
I see Rita put her hand up.
Rita looks like she's seconding that. Okay. Do we do it like we do it full board?
Yeah, everybody, any board members voting no?
Anybody
or abstaining?
Yeah, raise your hand. Okay. I don't
see
things going up. So we'll write a letter. Billy, you want to take a shot at the first draft on that? Okay. And then we'll circulate it around the committee, the members of the committee. Or you want me to? I think I have everybody who's on the. I have everybody down. I'll circulate it among the board members who are on the call here. How about that?
Ed, just for the public record, would you read out everybody who's a board member who's still here?
Yes.
That way.
Yeah. So I have Alita, I have Billy, Elizabeth Rose, Gail Barron, Kim Selway, I have Marco, I have Rebecca, Rita, I have Sandra, correct? Am I pronouncing that correct? Sandra and
Sandrea.
Sandrea. My apologies. Boy, just terrible today. And Taina. Yes, I got that right the second time. Thank you.
And the two of us.
And the two of us. Okay. Is that everybody? Yes?
Yeah.
Billy has
and
his hand
I
back
think we also have to have next meeting. We really have to discuss. Marco, you keep on bringing it up, but we have to also talk about how we're going to get a real affordable housing in this community, and that's something we have to talk about. And I mean, I don't know if the board will do it, and we can't do it by letter, but I really want to talk about how we raise money, which I seem to think it should be income tax and capital gains taxes, or however you want to do it, to pay for affordable housing so we can build more affordable housing. Real affordable housing, because I'm sick of hearing the word, and it ends up being a farce.
Okay.
If I could just jump in, and before we lose Sam, I want to make sure for my own notes I had the bills that we're supporting, and what I have are S7628A, the housing access vouchers. I have S8667, that's extending the eviction moratorium. I have S08802, that's the rent cancellation. Sam, did I miss any?
Those are the three that I talked about, and those are the Senate numbers. Of course, there's assembly numbers as well. There is no assembly number for the extending the eviction and foreclosure moratorium.
Great. I just want to make sure. So Ed and Barbara, unless you have anything to add, I'll draft something that captures those three bills.
Thank you very much.
That's terrific. And then we'll have we'll circulate it among all the board members, and then send it, I guess, on to you, Alita, for circulating among the other community boards.
Alita, when's the next borough board meeting?
It's in August. I think August 20th, the third Thursday.
Okay.
But you can get it to the other board chairs before that, right?
Yeah, I'll send it by email. I've done that with other issues that have come before us.
Good.
Anybody have anything else? jokes, umbrellas? I guess we're not going outside. The thunder is
No.
over. The thunder is over in the mid 70s, at least, it seems.
It's still in the 80s. Sam, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So glad you came, Sam. Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Really, really great stuff. Anybody, any thoughts, anything parting? No? Okay. I guess we won't have our next meeting till September, but we'll pass the letter around in the interim.
Right. Okay. Okay. Stay safe, everybody.
Good to see everybody. I'll be it remotely. Look forward to seeing everybody in person.
The September date you guys have is the 23rd. Is that still good for you?
I think so.
Great.
September?
Yes.
Yeah, I think probably you'll have to be on. I don't think we'll be meeting in public yet. In anything virtual.
Fingers crossed. Okay.
Okay. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Stay dry.